Hello, and welcome to this HelloID provisioning product release video for September 2023. HelloID provisioning is a 100% born-in-the-cloud, easy-to-configure and maintain user provisioning solution. It helps organizations to fully automate the user lifecycle management in the network by connecting the HR or SIS as a source system. Every change in this source is detected and processed into the network. No more worries about stale user accounts, accumulation of licenses or access rights, manual user management, or compliancy issues. Please note that in this video, we will only show the new functionality for the September 2023 release. Please go to docs.helloid.com or our YouTube channel for more videos. Let's get started. In this video, we'd like to start with a PowerPoint presentation and then demo the new functionalities for the September 2023 release. We have two new items in this release. The first new feature is iteration support for PowerShell v2 target systems. With this new feature, we introduce the possibility to use the iteration value as part of the mapping. In this case, you can choose the iteration value to be calculated from the mapping, and this is because the UI mapping from the user interface is more straightforward than using the script. Another advantage of this new feature is that the value of the iteration can be returned from the script. In this case, it can be used when the maximum amount of incremental iterations has almost been reached, as an escape scenario. The second feature is the import source system from Github. We replaced the original source system catalog with a brand new integration with our Tools Forever GitHub repository. So now, the source connectors can be imported directly from the repository with almost no manual actions necessary. Let's see how these new functionalities work in detail. We will start with our first feature, the PowerShell v2 iteration support. It's in this part of the v2 connector, so it can be found underneath the target systems, where we have already prepared a little example. The functionality will need to be optionally enabled. In here, you have the uniqueness validation with a toggle, and once we enable this toggle, we have enabled the uniqueness check. Underneath, you can see some icons that all correspond to the event. So if we open up this section, we can, for example, use the create event. Once this create event has been executed, we will run a uniqueness check. Optionally, we can also enable the enable, update, delete, or disable events. Once this is in place, we need to go to the script, which is responsible for checking if the script is unique. This works in the same way as it does in the Active Directory. You have a PowerShell script, and from this PowerShell script, you can enter which fields you would like to check. In this case, we have a default script here, so there is the username and the external ID that are entered for checking. The username value should be checked if it is a unique field inside the system. To check this field against the system, we need to provide some logic, and that depends on the kind of system you're working with. So, for each system, you need some custom script to check if the value that's generated from the mapping has already been used by another person or another account. To determine this, we have some helping variables. Firstly, the person context.references.account. This is the account of the current user, so we can check if the generated value of a username is not already being used by another user with the same username, so that we are not checking against ourselves. The action context.data contains the fields from the mapping, so action context.data.username can be used to retrieve the value from the mapping in which the current username has been generated. Lastly, we have the action context.operation, and this operations corresponds to the operations of the event. So in the previous screen, we showed you the uniqueness check to be enabled on some specific types of events, and we can use this operation in case we only want to check for unique values once an account gets created or updated. So you can check against the operation state to see in which events you are working with the script. Now, once the value gets generated from the mapping, We can check it against the system, and once the system responds by telling us that it has found another user who has the same username in place, we need to return a result as an output. So we say that the field not unique has to be set to true, and then in this loop we would provide the name of the fields which are found as non-unique. So you don't have to return the value of the fields that have been found, but you have to send the name of the attribute back. So in this case, once the username is non-unique, we have to send the value of username as non-unique fields in the output context. This will go back and be returned into the mapping. So if we go to the mapping and check for the username mapping, you can see that in the context mapping, we now also have the possibility to work with the iteration value. This works in the same way. By default, the iteration gets started by 0. You can run your script, generate name, send it out to the uniqueness check, which will check if there is another one. Once it is found, the iteration will read incremental and be set to 1, 2, 3, etc. A remark on this is that the maximum amount of iterations is 50, so there will only be 50 iterations possible before the script will stop. This is to prevent an infinite loop where we cannot return from the value. To check if the value is non-unique, we have the script in place, and in some cases the maximum of 50 iterations will not be enough, and we need more. So we have also introduced the possibility to return an iteration value from the PowerShell script as an input to the iteration value being used in this JavaScript. If we go back to this script, you can see an output context variable in the end, which is a contained iteration. In this case, we generate a random to be returned as a result, so we have a script that says that between iterations 0 and 20, it should be incremental. But if the value is above 20, it returns a random. So it can be any number returned as an outcome in the JavaScript. We also have a remark on this PowerShell script. It has the same timeout as the other scripts, so a maximum of 30 seconds of timeout is the maximum for this script. Let's move on to the second feature, the GitHub integration. What we did for the GitHub integration is replacing the catalog. Before, when entering this catalog, there were a few systems which were built in, and now we have integrated our GitHub repository tools for every page. As you can see on the left side, we have a complete list of all the source systems for the provisioning engine, which can be retrieved from the catalog. When we go to an example system, let's take this one, the data from the repository will be retrieved and will be shown inside this model. In here, you will have the complete README file, which is part of the repository. On top, you can see the repository URL. So this is the URL of the repository we are currently looking at. In here, we have a tag of a release, and this tag is being used to identify which version we are importing when this connector will be created. So if we like this connection, we will import the release of version 2.0.1 when we get our repository. This information will also be stored in Elastic. So it's also available in Elastic and can be used for reporting or identifying which version was being used. On the right-hand side, we have a few attributes, and you can see we have persons and departments, and those two attributes correspond to the PowerShell script. Each source connector depends on two types of scripts: the person script, which is used for retrieving persons and contracts, and the department script, which is used for retrieving department data, like organizational units, etc. We also have the configuration and the mapping. The configuration contains the UI part. So most of the time, once the connector has been imported, it needs some customer-specific configuration. Let's say, for example, you are communicating with a web service, so you need a token, an endpoint, a username, a password, or other settings. So this is a connector configuration which is imported and directly usable as it is integrated in the scripts. What you need to provide in the configuration is just some basic settings dependent on the system you are working with. Then we have the mappings. The mappings is a default mappings file. If there is a default mapping available, we already have it in the repository. This will also be imported, and the fields for the person and contract tabs will automatically be mapped on the default set. You can see an exclamation mark here. Once we hover over this, you can see that there are extra items in this repository. In this case, it is some example data, so we have different mappings. By default, we import the mapping.json file. But as you can see here, we have 2 additional mappings, and if you would like to use those, you can import them manually. Specifically for this connector, you also need an integration with the source system, so we have some connectors for this one as well. If we have a closer look at another system, the Bamboo HR source system, for example, it is another source system, and if we would like to create this one, the Bamboo system has some custom fields in it. So there is a mapping, and inside the mapping, there are custom fields provided. Custom fields are not available by default, so once you would like to import that mapping, you have to make sure those custom fields are available as person or contract extensions. To show you how this works, we will press this Create button, and a toaster message will pop up on the bottom saying that there are unknown fields found. The unknown fields in this case are the custom rows. So this connector cannot be imported at the moment because the fields are missing. If we want to solve this, we can go to the system's custom fields, and if we go to the custom fields, we can create the custom fields as it was previously shown by providing a display name. When we asked whether this was for a person or a contract, we enter it was for a person field, and we say that the name of the missing field is the role field. Please be aware that the field name is case sensitive. So in this case, it showed that it was an uppercase R for role, so we provide this name with an uppercase R as well. Otherwise, it will show the error message once again. Once we have created this, we click on Save. Then we can go back to the source configuration and search for the Bamboo connector again. You will see the same connector in here, and if we move to Create, it's checking the mapping and saying that the customer field, which was not available before, is now available to be used in the mapping, so it can be imported and the system is in place. When the system is created, we will get the General tab with some general information. We have the Configuration tab, which is dependent on a different set for each system, and in this case, we need a subdomain and an API key. We have the system configuration, which contains the default persons and the department's scripts, and it's also automatically configured as a cloud system. If you would like a closer look at this toggle, we need to navigate back to Systems. And if we go to the repository, you can see that a system can have tags. In this case, we have a tag for Cloud and a tag for On-Premise. Once both these tags are in place, it can be used as cloud and on-premise systems, but the preferred one is the cloud. So if both tags are present, the cloud is the default setting to be used. So once we import a connector as a cloud, the toggle for cloud only will automatically be switched to a cloud only connector. If we import a system for only on-premises, the toggle will be set to on-premises. So this will be toggled automatically based on the tags of the repository. Now, when we go back to the configuration of this connector, you should see that we have the General Configuration Assistant tab in place, and we also have the person, and the person is the mapping file to be present. In here, you can see this field, which we recently created because it was missing, is also automatically part of the mapped fields, and also the field with the correct mapped value from the source. A remark on this release is a breaking change related to the HelloID agent that should be updated and running to the latest version of the HelloID agent. Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know if you have any additional questions. You can post your question in YouTube or send it to isupport@toolsforever.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive frequent updates about improvements and changes in HelloID. Have a wonderful day.